Bitcoin's death warrant may have just been signed, and I want to show you exactly why in this YouTube video. And it's not even about Bitcoin. We're actually going to go ahead and take a look at our favorite fiat currency in the world, the dollar. And if we take a look at what's been going on with the dollar, we have seen a big jump up for the dollar here. Honestly, really not something that we could have easily predicted. I mean, I was definitely saying that this was a resistance area, but the dollar has actually broken above this. And what this means in short is that if dollars, if real world currencies basically are picking up strength, a lot of the time that means that, you know, the kind of assets that you and I want to trade, want to invest in, they're not going to be performing so well. So there's a lot to go into. Stick with me here. Smash up the likes if you are excited. Let's break this down first. And actually, to be fair, we're going to start off with Bitcoin first, because if we take a closer look at Bitcoin and just really understand what's been going on, zoom in a little bit onto the 4-hour time frame, it is very clear now that we have been just trading sideways ever since we had this liquidity grab to the top. And this is important because it means that a lot of shorts were filled up here. So naturally, we're going to be expecting some sort of liquidity grab down here. We haven't had that yet. So, you know, that's something to be keeping an eye out for. And the other thing is just kind of reading the body language of the market, right? Previously, we were sideways over here, came up here. Now we're sideways at a slightly lower level. So if we're trying to kind of read between the lines, then the first thing that tells us very clearly, I think, is just quite simply that we are now, you know, really kind of testing the downside a little bit more, potentially getting ready to roll over to the downside, which is definitely not ideal. If we take a look at this chart here, also showing us something similar in a slightly more zoomed in perspective, this time on the 1-hour time frame. You can also see how we've been encountering some problems from the 1-hour Ichimoku cloud back here and back here. I know that you guys find it funny that I absolutely love the Ichimoku cloud, but guys, I mean, if you've been watching me for the last couple of years, I mean, you know, back me up here, drop it in the comments, you know the deal. These Ichimoku clouds are dangerously accurate, and you can see that coming into fruition over here as well. If you were trading based off the Ichimoku cloud right here, look at these wicks, just constant rejections. These little, you know, couple percentage point scalps, you know, are enough. You know, they're enough for traders who are still in this space. So those of you that are active in the space, I do want to highlight to you your exchange bonuses you're getting on this YouTube channel. Over $200,000 in bonuses if you follow the links in the description down below. BingX allowing you access to markets like Tesla, Amazon, and so on. Absolutely beautiful stuff. Check it out with the link in the description. Over 100K in bonuses, and Bybit, you already know the deal, up to 30K right there. We'll come back to that in a little bit, but let's go ahead and take a look at the dollar here. This has actually been a 5% move up for the dollar over the last 7 weeks, which might not sound like a lot to you and I, but for the dollar, that is a really big jump up, right? When the dollar moves up by 5%, that's a really big deal. Think of it like Bitcoin moving up by like 50%. And one of the things that this means, if we just kind of look at this chart right here, is that the dollar has now broken this previous high. And, you know, when you break previous highs, that's when you start to show, like, you know, there is quite a bit of strength here. You might be ready to rally up a little bit higher. If you're wondering why, it's to do with like treasury bonds and stuff like that. I don't know, stuff that goes over my head, but you know, people are just buying the dollar basically, and we're seeing, you know, that kind of being reflected with the dollar index right here sweeping this high. And one of the things that could potentially mean is, now that the dollar has shown a lot of strength, you know, if it does kind of cool off a little bit and come back down, you know, these previous areas that were acting as support, that were acting as resistance, may end up acting as support now. And this is really important, because if you take a look, if we kind of zoom in on this and really kind of understand what was happening back here, what we had was this area acting as resistance back in like June, May of this year. And then when we came back here just a couple, you know, just 1 or 2 weeks ago, we got a steep rejection here. The dollar did drop down. So we know that this area was important resistance for the dollar. And that's one of the reasons that I'm kind of highlighting this to you guys, is now like, look, this might turn into a situation where the dollar uses a previous area of resistance. Look at this big rejection. I mean, this is a big deal for the dollar. You know, if this area was rejecting the dollar before and now we're above it, you know, that's one of the signs that if we do come back down, we could end up finding some support back here in the 104 area. And what this means is, you know, I mean, you already know the deal. When you break an area of resistance, naturally, you're typically going to rise up to the next one, right? So we had our resistance over here at 104, and now that next area is going to be at 108 roughly. So that's where we saw these peaks back here, back in 2022. This was when Bitcoin was getting absolutely bloody decimated. And actually, there's something I want to show you on this note, because if we take a look at this chart right here, if I just hide my camera just a second, right there, you know, what you can see is that this little drop down that the dollar had, the same drop that I was showing you right here, see this wick right here, that is the same as this right here. I've just zoomed in. You see, when the dollar drops, that's when Bitcoin gets these big moves to the upside. So I think this is one of the reasons that, you know, Bitcoin has been struggling for quite some time. It's the clearest inverse correlation that I've been talking to you guys about for ages on this YouTube channel, right? If you've been watching me for a little bit, you're going to know that I've always been telling you guys that, generally speaking, if the dollar is going up, Bitcoin is going to suffer, and if the dollar is going down, Bitcoin is going to have some sunshine here. So that statement is only partially true right now, and that's what's actually really interesting, because when the dollar dropped, Bitcoin went up. But since the dollar has been rising, I mean, for the most part, we have seen a drop for Bitcoin, but especially over these, recent days where the dollar has really climbed up, and definitely climbed up very quickly, Bitcoin hasn't done anything. Bitcoin hasn't actually shown us any real signs of weakness here. It's not great that we're down here, but we haven't fallen over like we were doing previously. So this is actually one of those instances now where, Bitcoin doesn't seem to be getting as badly affected as it usually does by the dollar, which is absolutely great, because one of the things that we can actually start to see if we do look back at the dollar chart right now is that the dollar is kind of, it's been rallying up for a while. And the thing about the dollar is it doesn't really perform like a stock, right? Like, we're not really expecting, major corrections before continuing back up. But we do still get them. And especially, after such a big run, these runs can't necessarily go on forever. They do sometimes. I want to show this to you. When the dollar wants to rally, it can just fly. it looks like Bitcoin in a bull market, right? When the dollar does actually start getting really strong. So, this is not to say that the dollar is going to stop rising up from here, but at the end of the day, some sort of correction could definitely be due, and it couldn't come at a better time, because Bitcoin is still at this rock solid support at the $25,000 level, which is absolutely beautiful. That is exactly what we want to be seeing at a time like this right now in this market, right? Where we are actually seeing, Bitcoin not performing too badly, and the dollar potentially starting to approach an area where, yes, it has been strong, but some sort of correction at some point, we do have to start saying that, we could be expecting the dollar to, come back down a little bit. And like I said, with this chart right here, if this little drop is what caused Bitcoin to pump up by, nearly $2,000-$3,000, then, what would happen if the dollar took a more meaningful drop down now? What would happen if the dollar came back down to here? Does it mean that Bitcoin, potentially rises up to, quite interesting price levels, potentially back up here, maybe even a little bit higher, and then down? That would actually work out really well. It would paint a really nice head and shoulders pattern, and it will also allow a Bitcoin to, kind of capture some more liquidity up here and drop back down. So we've got some mixed signals on the chart right now, because if you just look at Bitcoin, it's not ideal. But if you look at Bitcoin from these broader kind of perspectives of the things that usually hurt Bitcoin, then actually we might have a little bit of a breath of fresh air over here. Let's take a look at the S&P 500 as well. This is obviously always very, very interesting. If you take a look at what we've been seeing right here, it's been kind of 200 days since we've been able to break, since we've been above this area of resistance, and we are now kind of getting ready to tackle this area of resistance right here again on the S&P 500. This is actually really exciting, and there is a trade that I've planned out for the S&P 500 here as well. Because of that, that's going to be on BingX, because BingX allows me to trade the S&P 500 without KYC as well, which is absolutely fantastic. And this is the kind of thing where if the S&P 500 is able to get above, then I would probably just be expecting a moonshot up to that all-time high, or something relatively close. And I think broadly speaking, these indices markets are looking pretty good. If we look at the Nasdaq index as well, it's good. I've been hearing people talk about how this kind of looks like a dead cat bounce and stuff like that, and I can understand why you would say that, but if you think that every second rally is a dead cat bounce, you'll end up thinking that this was a dead cat bounce back when the price was only over here, or you'd end up thinking that this was a dead cat bounce back when the price was only here. You know what I mean? So it's one of those things where I don't like to bet on dead cat bounces. I definitely think that right now the trend is your friend, and we haven't really broken structure anyway. So I'm really liking what I'm seeing here with the Nasdaq, for example, and the S&P 500 both looking on par for some really, really nice gains here. And I think that if we do start to get some kind of blow-ups here, that's when we're going to start to expect that money coming back into Bitcoin, right? We've spoken about this quite a bit, but just basic kind of psychology and economics in a sense, where we talk about how, if the S&P 500 is performing well, if stocks individually are performing well, then typically that's going to open up the risk appetite a little bit more. That's going to make people a little bit more willing, a little bit more happy to take on some more risk with their capital. And, typically when that kind of thing happens, we do start to see Bitcoin, rallying up a little bit more as well, right? Because when people want to take more risk, they look at riskier assets. They want to make more money, they look at riskier assets. And that's where, kind of things like Bitcoin come in as well. So that could definitely get quite exciting and be very interesting indeed. Definitely something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on if we do start to see these markets break up. If we do take a look at the path for the S&P 500 here, potentially, rallying to the upside, this is quite interesting. We could see a break to the all-time high, a bit of a pullback, and then this is going to be the area that I'm going to be watching for some support here. It's definitely a trade that I'm interested in taking because of how easy the S&P 500 is. At times like this, Bitcoin is really hard to trade. Bitcoin doesn't really move that much, but if you're in these more traditional finance markets, you do still have some volatility to trade based off, which is why I think that BingX is such a powerful offer here, because especially right now in a bear market, we can't trade crypto that much. I mean, you can try and you'll probably lose money a lot of the time. It's just not easy when there's not that much volatility. But when we've got a firm understanding of how these traditional finance markets operate, then actually it becomes pretty easy to be like, yeah, if we get above to this all-time high, well then yeah, this area that was resistance now, that was resistance back here in 2022, could definitely act as support. It was already support back here anyway, back in late 2021. So it's very possible to say that it's going to be support again over here, which would be very, very interesting to, allow the S&P 500 to rally deeper into the 5,000 range, which is obviously uncharted territory. It's not something that we've ever seen before on this chart, which I think is really, really interesting. If we go ahead and take a look at how I've just got the wrong chart here, actually. Let me just bring up the correct chart, bear with me. If we go ahead and take a look at how this could look for Bitcoin, if Bitcoin were to do something, somewhat similar, then I mean, it's the same deal here. If Bitcoin were to break above the $30,000 level right here, I mean, the previous time when we broke above the 30K level, this was a 102% move. The next time when we bounced off the 30K level, it was a 114% move, right? So if we end up pulling something similar to that right now, that does put us close to those all-time highs. I'm not saying that something like that is going to happen. I think it's too far-fetched and too early to call for that kind of thing. But what I do want to highlight for you guys is again just the sentiment. I'm active on Twitter. My link to my Twitter is in the description. The tweets are firing off right now. You guys are gonna love them. They're really funny. If you are active on Twitter and you're just kind of understanding the sentiment in the Discord groups and Telegram or whatever across traders, it's pretty clear that people are pretty pessimistic. This is one of the main things I've been talking about on the YouTube channel, right? Like, I'm not trying to go one way or another in particular. I'm just pointing out that, Bitcoin, if we do look at this chart, has been pretty stable at an area of support that we already knew was support, right? I mean, it's not new information for us. It's nothing surprising whatsoever. Bitcoin has been holding on to this level pretty well. It's doubled from the low, yet people are still really, really scared. And so, one of the things I want to highlight to you guys is, now we're in September, right? This is month 9 of the year. The halving is like, what, 6 months away now or something like that? Maybe a little bit more, maybe like 9 months away, but it's not 8 months. It's not actually that far away anymore, for the next halving for Bitcoin. And typically the lead up to these halving cycles, the lead up to these halving events is when we see Bitcoin starting to pump up. So, and this is the thing that's just, I don't want to go mega bull on you guys and just like leave reason to the wind, but like if you ask me to paint a chart for you that makes Bitcoin look like it's gonna blow the fuck up, then what I would do is I would crash Bitcoin all the way down to abysmally low levels. I would scare the shit out of people. I would double its price and make sure that people are still scared shitless of the market anyway. And then within the lead up to the halving, I would start to, I would correct. Like we've already doubled. I would paint a big correction on the chart to show us that Bitcoin is ready to strap that jetpack back to itself and rise up to the moon. And then I'd just get ready for this, because this is one of the, if you look at it from that perspective, it's actually a very powerful thing to do. If you guys have read books like Market Wizards, it's linked in the description down below as well. One of my all-time favorite books in my life. Can't tell you how much money that book has made me. One of the traders there, he actually talks about like his job is to really intensely visualize what the world would look like if his trading idea plays out. This is one of the things that could actually help out really well is if we work backwards. It's like if Bitcoin is going to get up to its all-time high, how would that look if we work backwards? Let's say it gets up to its all-time high in the middle of next year. What would it look like at the beginning of next year? What would it look like at the end of this year? Let's work backwards like that. And this is, I think, a very healthy setup for it. I mean, a massive correction in the lead up to a halving after we've already proven that we're in a bull trend is a big deal. It definitely does show us that, the puzzle pieces are there right now. Does it mean that we can just completely fuck it up and throw this to the wind? Yeah, it's very possible that this can go wrong. We're very, very close to invalidating our uptrend right now and sweeping our previous low. This is one of the key things that tells you if we're still in a bull market, right? Is if we not even a bull market, but more specifically just an uptrend, is if we're setting higher lows in the market. Right now, we still have a structure of higher lows, but it's not, it's not substantially higher anymore. And if we do collapse a little bit lower, then that would be the end of it. We're going to be basically in I don't know about in a downtrend, but we'll certainly not be in an uptrend anymore. But one thing I do want to note for you guys is that, we had the same structure right here. We had a series of higher lows. Take a look at this right here. And then we did have this one flash crash down. This is the big crash that I entered my long on Bitcoin as well. And it worked out absolutely beautifully. I wasn't scared about this, even though the uptrend was broken, because I knew that this was just a liquidity grab for the market to rise on a little bit higher. And that's what I was talking to you guys about at the beginning of this video as well, right? Where I'm making the point that, like we did trade up here. We did grab the liquidity down here. Well, if we grab the liquidity down here now and we do something a little bit like this, it would, one, invalidate the uptrend, and two, restart the uptrend immediately, which is exactly what we did previously. Now, I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to repeat history exactly, but a lot of the time, it's not an unhealthy perspective to take, that Bitcoin is going to rhyme with its history, that Bitcoin is going to exhibit similar characteristics at different points in the future. Bitcoin does it all the time with these kind of deviations just to grab a little bit of liquidity. And I think there's an argument to be made for that. If we take a look at the 𝗬𝗢𝗥𝗙𝗚 dashboard, which is something that we haven't actually looked at that much over these last few videos, what we've got, first of all, is an abysmally low fear and greed index. We're now down to 41. We're pretty close to extreme fear. But Binance Retail, still 2.6 longs for every short. I mean, massively, massively long. All it would take, ladies and gents, is a little flash crash just down here. A lot of people are going to be having their stop losses, what have I done here? A lot of people are going to be having their stop loss. I'm pressing the wrong buttons here. What's going on? One sec. They're going to be setting their stop losses here. They're going to be setting their stop losses down here, down here, down here. If we were to get a liquidity grab down to, say, the high 23K, mid 23K range, that would be enough to stop out all of those positions and then take the market a little bit higher as well. And one of the things that could definitely allow that to happen is if the dollar did continue to rise as well. So this is where it's a sticky situation, because we've got a lot of strength on the dollar, and it's got so much strength that it, clearly looks like it could continue to rise up. I mean, it's already broken its previous area of resistance, and that means it's no longer in a downtrend as well. So it could definitely lead to some really big upside, for the dollar here. And of course, when that kind of thing happens, it does just put a lot more pressure on Bitcoin. It doesn't mean Bitcoin can't rise, but it certainly, in my experience, does mean that Bitcoin's going to struggle to rise a lot more, which is an important distinction. If we go ahead and take a look at this right here, this is a really interesting little chart I've got for you guys, showing off the 200 week moving exponential moving average here, the 200-week EMA. This is a really interesting chart. Now, these 200 EMAs, 200 moving averages, SMAs, are really, really interesting. They tend to provide very reliable bits of support, very reliable bits of resistance. We had this, continuously just throughout the last basically year and a half over here, where, we found a little bit of support on this crash right here. We found some resistance right here. We found very clear resistance right here. And now we're finding clear support along this moving average line as well. So it's definitely interesting. There's definitely something here that's worth keeping an eye on. I think if we take a look at the normal moving averages, it's a little bit of a different picture, but let's go ahead and take a look at that as well, because I am very curious live with you on this YouTube video. Let's go ahead and throw this onto the chart and see what we're looking at for the 200-week. The 200-week moving average was over here, so we've actually lost it and we found resistance off it. And the 50-week moving average is below us right now. So, and by the way, this is where we got the death cross, right? So this is why, these death crosses are not the most reliable thing in the world. I mean, I spoke about it in one of my previous videos, but it's not the, it's not the thing that I'm going to base all of my analysis off, because we got the death cross back here and we're still very clearly, bearish according to that death cross. Yet, I mean, the price managed to pump up by 40% from there, and even up to now we're still up by 16% after the death cross. The problem with these kind of things is because they're lagging indicators, they tell you what happened after it's already happened, and so you have to pick your time frames correctly. On the daily time frame, for example, this is something that we were looking at. We're about to get this death cross right here. This is where, it could definitely be a bit more of an alarm sign, an alarm bell right here. I mean, we got the golden cross right here, and we pumped up by 37% to the high, or again by 11% to the current price. So if you zoom in, these golden crosses, these death crosses are a little bit more reliable, but at the end of the day, it's still not something that scares me too much. But, this kind of chart showing me where support is, hugely valuable, I would say. I mean, definitely something that I think is worth paying attention to, something that could definitely make a difference in this market right now and really help us keep some support in order to rise a little bit higher. So things are looking interesting. It's still mixed signals. I'm still in my long position. I'm still not scared being in that long position. I'm happy to be in it with the capital that I have remaining in my position. You guys have known what's been going on there. This is a little screenshot of that trade. I put in about 100K. I've already secured about 140, and I've still got a little bit, I mean, probably a little bit more than this right now, 17, 18K in profit on the rest of my position right here. So I'm super happy with how that's been going on. You already know the deal. I'm going to keep you updated with how that does continue to play out in this market. If you do want to check out the exchanges that I'm using, then you already know the deal. The links are down below. You've got huge bonuses available to you all as well with these links. And with that, I really hope you have enjoyed this video. You know exactly what to do if you have, and I'll see you all in the next one. Cheers.